I look now and I think we carry the burdens as moms of what is going on everywhere. I am talking everywhere in the whole wide world at every given time.
You sent me an article that you wrote. This was, I think you wrote it a couple weeks ago. And it's called The Original Influencer. We've gotten kind of into this weird cycle of, these little short, what do you call them? Reels?
Reels. Yes.
These reels where you're just flipping through and you're on Instagram and you're watching all these other people live these perfect lives. And you're like, that's not me. So let's talk about this. As homeschool moms, I think this is something that we all struggle with, whether we struggle with it on social media or in real life.
Right.
It's a struggle. So, I mean, first, let me just ask, what prompted you to write this, and then talk a little bit about the article.
Okay. Well, I think what prompted me is we talk so much about the effects of social media on kids. Like, I think in the homeschool world, everybody's pretty much on the same page. Like, your kids aren't on it. We know that it's damaging. We get that it's damaging. Like, that's kind of that's kind of something that the world knows now, right? There's enough stuff out there that people get that. But it's just struck me lately on how many moms are drawn to this. And we don't talk about that. We don't talk about the effects on moms that are drawn to it, because we think, well, we're adults, we can handle it, it's not a big deal. It's not like we're going to be sucked into things like porn or, scary people. Like, those are the things you worry about with your kids, but we're like, oh, we're moms, that would never, And so we don't think of it that way. But then it just really hit me as I'm watching all these young moms who are, okay, when I first started homeschooling, I went to every older mom I could get my hands on. Can I look through your stuff? Tell me about homeschooling. Tell me how to be a mom. Tell me what, how do you fix that meal? How do you, and I just, the women in my church or who I went to, my mom, her friends, and I'm looking around now, and my little cousin calls me all the time with questions, and it blesses me. But I'm looking at her generation. I'm going, you guys are getting all your information on social media. Everything that you're learning from your peers. And we're going to go into this, but I think that's what spurred me as I'm looking at how I grew up learning things, and then this new generation and where they're getting their information and how they're getting their information. And it's really struck me at, honestly, how damaging it is. And I'm not saying that there's not good that comes from it, because there can be, but it really hit me. And so I was, I don't know, inspired to write that article. And you can find that at our website. It's up on there, but,
and we'll link to it, of course.
Yeah, we can link to it, but it just really talks about, where are we to get our influence? Who are we to be influenced by? Where are we to learn? And it dives into Titus 2 and what that really looks like. And so, so you and I were like, let's talk about it on the podcast. Let's talk about the things that we need to be aware of as moms as we navigate social media, not for our kids, but for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a tough thing to balance. I feel like, I know for myself, if we go back to the olden days, of not having any of this stuff. I just was talking with Brooklyn the other day, and I said, I've said this on the podcast before, but I, in so many ways, hate the world that they're growing up in,
right.
Because it's so different than how we grew up. I said, but like Esther, we're here for such time as this. Like, the Lord knew that we would be here at this time in history. And so I'm not going to fret about it. Like, we do what we do with what we have.
Right.
But life was so much simpler back in the 80s and 90s when we were growing up. It just
100%.
was. We didn't have all of we had pressure back then, I felt like, but it was more peer pressure, like in person.
Right.
Or maybe, our teen magazine or 17 magazine, which was total garbage. And I wish I hadn't ever had a subscription to either of those.
Right.
But that was what we saw. And now it's like everything has just changed so drastically.
Yep. And it's everywhere. And I think too, like, as moms, well, like you said, things were simpler. We were designed to know what's going on in our homes, and then know what's going on as far as outside of our homes, in our communities, in our churches. Right. And historically, people really didn't know much about what was going on. I mean, go way back when. They didn't know much about what was going on outside of literally their neighborhood or their little small towns, And then maybe as time went on, they would know what was going on a town over. Or maybe, as things progressed, they would know a little bit what was going on in their state. But I look now and I think we carry the burdens as moms of what is going on everywhere. I am talking everywhere in the whole wide world at every given time. At any moment in time, we are carrying, and because of the nature of how God made women, and we're nurturers, and we're, we carry some of that. We are carrying the weight of the entire world all the time. And we see moms who are overwhelmed and they're depressed and they feel hopeless. And it's so overwhelming. And I remember my husband told me that one time. He's like, we were never meant to know what's going on across the ocean. Like people didn't know what was going on. And I'm not saying turn off the news. We do need to know. It's very important that we know what's going on in our world so we can be active. We're called to be. But ultimately, it's our communities and now it's like nobody really knows what's going on in their community, but they know what's happening across the country and across the world all the time. And we carry that weight, and it causes depression. It causes anxiety.
Right.
And we were never meant to know what's going on all over, all the time.
Right.
Always,
Yeah. And I think also so much of what we see is not reality.
Oh,
you look at the news and you see, for instance, we just had this crazy, a few weeks ago, this crazy like windstorm that came through our town.
Right.
And it wasn't a tornado, but it was like 100-mile-an-hour plus winds.
Right.
And so it did some destruction. Some trees fell. I don't think that anybody lost their lives over it, but I mean, it was destructive, but like in our neighborhood, I think like a couple of people had trees that, tipped over and that was about it. But of course, then my mom calls and she's like, "Are you okay? Are you dead?"
Totally.
Because
Putting
she sees on the news, that, it looks like all of the Tulsa area is completely destroyed.
Totally.
And so much of what we see it's false. It's dramatized.
It's
for the story.
Yeah.
You see the stories. This was several years ago. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a hurricane that came through the East Coast. And I think it was in South Carolina. There was a news story and it was like a news reporter standing in this crazy, water, and then behind him and looking like, the wind is blowing him, away.
Right.
And then behind him are two people riding bikes and walking. Like it was no big deal. And you're just like,
funny.
That was so fake. They're just being
totally
dramatic.
do it for numbers. They do it for views. And that's what we can go into, with as far as social media, because it's a bit the same.
Right.
And then what it does is it makes us go, I would watch that and I'd go, oh no, I need to prepare for a big wind like that, because that could happen. So everybody's in this constant prepping phase. And then I stop and I'm like, I will never, ever, ever get a wind like that where I live, because I have the mountains. I should probably be thinking about like avalanches but when we see everything now, I'm stressing about, the tide coming in. And I'm like, I don't even live anywhere near the ocean, but it's putting things in us that we are as moms naturally, because we're protectors, and then we start worrying about things that aren't ours to worry about. They're not even a part of our sphere and our real life, but we're watching it in other people's lives. And it really derails what God has called us to do in the here and the now.
Homeschool Insights is sponsored by CTC Math. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com and try it for free. For more great homeschool inspiration and resources, listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked Podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.